So far, the bigger picture hasn't changed, from Obama's last 200 days in office to Trump's first 200, or for any president of the modern era for that matter. Someone needs to give Attorney General Jeff Sessions a copy of the Constitution. And while they're at it, give President Trump one as well. And you know who needs a copy the most? The police of this country, who are trained to think the general public is the enemy. It seems like none of these individuals, who have all sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, have ever even read any of the nation's founding documents. If they actually understood the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, there would be no militarized police, no SWAT team raids, and no tasering of children.
3-year-old girl. 720. Looks like one of my barbs went into her.
And there would certainly be no absurd asset forfeiture schemes or any other government-sanctioned abuses that are passed off as law and order these days.
Sheriff's office, don't move. Get your hands out of your pocket now.
Come on, I don't want to come in there. I don't want to shoot your dog.
We don't know a lot about forfeiture, and that's one of the real problems with it. We know that in the federal system, civil forfeiture is by far the most used form of forfeiture because it doesn't require a conviction. Criminal forfeiture, which does require a conviction, is only used about 13% of the time. It's 87% for the civil forfeiture. As anyone who's even seen a rerun of Law and Order knows how the criminal justice system is supposed to work. If the police think you committed a crime, they can arrest you, and then they have to take you to trial. And at that trial, you have the presumption of innocence. The government is supposed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you committed the crime that they say you did. In civil forfeiture, if the government thinks that your property is somehow connected with a crime, they can take it, they can keep it, and in most instances, they get to keep 100% of it. And they can do all this without ever charging you with a crime, much less convicting you with one. And if you challenge them in court, most often, you have to prove your own innocence in order to get your property back. And that turns what we know about constitutional protections on its head.
And the other thing is asset forfeiture. People want to say we're taking money and without due process. That's not true. You know, we take money from dope dealers.
So you're saying the asset taking you used to do and it had an impact, right? And you're not allowed to do it now?
No, they have curtailed it a little bit. And I'm sure the folks are...
And that's for legal reasons or just political reasons?
They make it political and they make it, they make up stories.
I'd like to look into that, okay? There's no reason for that, okay? Danny, do you think there's any reason for that? Are you aware of this?
I'm aware of that, Mr. President, and we have gotten a great deal of criticism for the asset forfeiture, which, as the sheriff said, is frequently was taking narcotics proceeds and other proceeds of crime, but there has been a lot of pressure on the department to curtail some of that.
So what do you do? So in other words, they have a huge stash of drugs. So in the old days, you take it. Now we've criticized if we take it. So who gets it? What happens to it?
Well, we have what is called equitable sharing, where we usually share it with the local police departments for whatever portion that they worked on the case. And it was a very successful program, very popular with the law enforcement community.
And now what happens?
Well, now we've just been given, there's been a lot of pressure not to forfeit in some cases.
Who would want that pressure, you know? I mean, other than like bad people, right? But who would want that pressure? You would think they'd want this stuff taken away.
You have to be careful how you speak, I guess, but a lot of pressure's coming out of was coming out of Congress. I don't know if that'll continue now or not.
I think less so. I think Congress is going to get beat up really badly by the voters because they've let this happen. And I think badly. I think you'll be back in shape. So asset forfeiture, we're going to go back on, okay?
Thank you, sir.
I mean, how simple can anything be? You all agree with that, I assume, right?
Absolutely.
Do you even understand the other side of it?
No.
It's like some things,
No sense.
sort of like the Iran deal. Nobody even understands how a thing like that could have happened. It does nothing.
You're allowed to profit from the illegal proceeds, right?
Okay.
So if you're going to sell narcotics and sell illegal drugs in our country, you also cannot profit from that. And so we seize those profits.
So do we need any legislation or any executive orders for that, would you say, Dana? To put that back in business?
I don't think we need any executive orders. We just need kind of some encouragement
Okay.
to move in that direction.
Good. You're encouraged. I love that answer because that's better than signing executive orders and then these people take it and they make it look so terrible. Oh, it's so terrible. Would anybody like to make a statement? A couple of
Mr.
you?
President,
Yes, sir.
on the asset forfeiture, we've got a state senator in Texas that was talking about introducing legislation to require conviction before we could receive that forfeiture money.
you believe that?
And I told him that the cartel would build a monument to him in Mexico if he could get that legislation
Who's the
back.
state senator? Do you want to give his name? We'll destroy his career.
I was raided. They took everything, even though I was fully compliant with the Michigan medical marijuana laws. They charged me with possession with intent to deliver, even though I'm allowed to possess and deliver. They have had my stuff for 10 months, my ladders, my iPads, my children's iPads, my children's phones, my medicine for my patients. Why a ladder? Why my vibrator? I don't know either. Why TVs? When they left the stuff that forfeiture laws were made for in this state and in this country, they left my ballasts, my lights, the stuff that I used to grow drugs. They left that.
What flavor? Did you punch that one regular?
How was it up to sticker in her fucking knob?
He said.
According to USA Today, the U.S. Department of Justice received some $2 billion, believe it or not, in forfeited items in 2013. Since 2008, local and state law enforcement agencies nationwide have raked in some $3 billion in forfeitures through so-called federal equitable sharing programs.
As you can see, these asset forfeiture schemes are never conducted in a proper, just manner. There are hundreds of examples of law-abiding citizens and legal businesses being raided and having their assets stolen just because the police want to stuff their own pockets. This is what happens the vast majority of the time. Stealing people's cars, TVs, money, or even invading their private space just to be assholes. They think they're above the law, and they think they can do whatever they want, because typically they can. They're no different than a street gang. And as you could see, your commander-in-chief had no idea what this was. He had no idea. He thought they were talking about the drugs the whole time. You notice how no one around him told them what they were talking about? They knew he wasn't on the right track, but they wanted that. They wanted those laws. And without due process, they can take people's assets without due process. That is so unconstitutional. It's just mind-boggling. And then that one guy just slipped that in at the very end. Well, we can take people's assets and their money, but it's connected to narcotic trafficking. And then he tries to tie it in with the cartel. Sorry, that's not what they're doing. They're going after legal, law-abiding businesses that grow plants. Because they want the money. They want to stuff their own greedy pockets. Paying taxes isn't enough for them. Then he says, who would want that? The bad guys? He doesn't even know what it is. Who would want that law? The bad guys? No. Constitutionalists want that law. The so-called liberty movement should want that law. This is our commander-in-chief, and he doesn't even know. He has no idea. This is a prime example of how he's a puppet. The people around him were just manipulating him to get what they wanted. He didn't even know what they were talking about. He's never dealt with police. He is a rich 1%er billionaire. He's not one of the rest of the cattle. You ever wonder how we got to this point? Those of you that have been in this movement for a minimum of 4 years, just paying attention to it, where we have someone in office that people trust with their life. They think he's a constitutionalist. They think he's looking out for the average citizen's rights. People have no idea where we're going. They're not going to even see it hit them. First, we have to understand the hypocrisy of the so-called alternative media that used to call this stuff out.
Police are more awake than the public, probably 5 times. If George Soros wants us to have a war with the police, what does that tell you? Death, death, death. Now, hey, don't worry, the bankers are going to take everything you got, cops. You think you can just deal death on us and deal pain on us? You don't think there aren't bigger devils above you in the New World Order that'll have their way with you? You think you're safe from evil? They take these examples of bad cops and create the perception that the police are out killing everybody. And so that's why when I'm driving down the road and there's lanes on both sides of me, Austin cop, no lights on, just run right up behind you with pleasure. Just get, and then swing around and almost hit you. And then just sit there with a light in your face going, you son of a bitch, citizen, you are slave, civilian, I rule you. Officer, what's this checkpoint? What's going on? Get out of the car. Hey, officer, I'm not going anywhere. Your papers aren't in order. But that's it, they argued with us. Patriot Act, Patriot Act. Bill, where are you going? The children are crying.
As you can see, the main propaganda arm of the Trump administration, InfoWars, has done a complete 180 on its stance on police. It used to be overly anti-police, to the point where it was causing issues, where unstable listeners were taking actions into their own hands and attempting to kill and killing police officers under Alex Jones' direction. He has done a complete 180 on his stance, no one seems to care, and furthermore, the police issue is now out of the alternative media's scope for the most part. They are militarizing and not being held accountable without public oversight. People are not going to see what hits them. We have to make sure we keep this issue somewhat at the forefront, hold them accountable, and make sure they do not militarize like they are right now. We have some serious problems in this country, and they won't be solved on the golf course, or by whining and dining Zionist CEOs, or by giving local police forces more military equipment, locking down the nation, or by pretending that the only threats to our freedom come from the forces beyond our borders. Government corruption and corporate ownership of the government are at an all-time high. Police shootings and misconducts have continued unabated, and are now praised by much of the so-called alternative media. The endless Zionist wars continue to push us to the brink of financial ruin. We the people are still being treated as cattle, as if we have no rights, as if we are entitled to no protections, and exist solely for the purpose of sustaining the American police state with our hard-earned tax dollars, even under the so-called People's President, Donald Trump. Just take the policing crisis in this country for instance. Sessions, the chief lawyer for the government and the head of the Justice Department, which is entrusted with ensuring that the nation's laws are faithfully carried out and holding the government officials accountable to abiding their oaths to uphold the Constitution, doesn't think we have a policing problem in America.
Unfortunately, in recent years, law enforcement as a whole, I think, has been unfairly maligned and blamed.
In fact, Sessions thinks the police are doing a great job, apart from the, quote, individual misdeeds of bad actors. That's it. For that matter, so does Trump. Sessions thinks the nation's police forces are doing such a great job, they should be rewarded with more military toys, weapons, gear, equipment, and less oversight by the Justice Department. As for Trump, he believes, quote, the dangerous anti-police atmosphere in America is wrong, and has vowed to end it. Excuse me while I flush what remains of my Constitution down the toilet. By the way, I will include all these articles in the description below. Clearly, Trump has not been briefed on the fact that it has never been safer to be a cop in America. According to statistics, it is safer to be a cop than it is to simply live in many U.S. cities. It's safer to be a cop than it is to be a fisherman, a logger, a roofer, a pilot, a miner, a taxi driver, or a trucker. It is safer to be a cop today than it has been in years, decades, or even centuries by some measures. You want to know what's dangerous? Being a citizen in a police state, treating cops as if they deserve more protection than any other fellow citizen, and training cops to think that they're soldiers at a battlefield and everybody's out to get them. If you tell cops over and over and over that they're in a war, they're under siege, they're under attack, and that the citizens are the enemy instead of the people they're supposed to protect, they're going to create an atmosphere of fear, tension, and hostility that can only end badly, as it has for so many others. Frankly, if there is a war taking place in this country, it's on the American people. After all, we're the ones being shot and tasered and tracked and beaten and intimidated and threatened and invaded and probed. What is Trump doing to fix this policing crisis that threatens the safety of every man, woman, and child in this country? Not a damn thing. Incredibly, according to the study by the American Medical Association, police-inflicted injuries send more than 50,000 Americans to the hospital emergency room every year. Yet Slate warns, if you dare criticize a police officer, let alone challenge the myth of a hero cop, a myth used to legitimize brutality as necessary, justify policies that favor the police, and punish anyone who dares to question police tactics or oppose the unions and agendas, you will be denounced as a disloyal, un-American, and dangerous domestic terrorist. As Dag Feig says, we should appreciate the value and the sacrifice of those who choose to serve and protect, but that appreciation should not include a get-out-of-jail-free card for a vast army of 800,000 people guaranteed general arrest powers, and increasingly armed with automatic weapons and armored vehicles. Vast army, equipped with deadly weapons, and powered with arrests, immune from accountability for wrongdoing. What is this? Stalin Communist America? Have we strayed so far from our revolutionary roots that we no longer can even recognize tyranny when it's staring us right in the face? The fact that the police are choosing to fatally resolve encounters with their fellow citizen by using guns speaks volumes about what is wrong with policing in America today, where police officers are being dressed in the trappings of war, drilled in the deadly art of combat, and trained upon, quote, every individual they interact with is an armed threat, and every situation is a deadly encounter in the making. Mind you, the federal government is the one responsible for turning our police into the extension of the military, having previously distributed billions of dollars worth of military equipment to local police agencies, including high-powered weapons, assault vehicles, drones, tactical gear, body armor, weapon scopes, infrared imaging systems, night vision goggles, equipment intended for the use on the battlefield. Not to mention the federal grants for militarized training of SWAT teams. Sessions and Trump are gung-ho for more of that. And despite what Sessions wants you to believe, the daily shootings, beatings, and roadside strip searches, in some cases rape, of American citizens by police are not isolated incidents. This is the issue. Likewise, the events of recent years are not random occurrences. The invasive surveillance, the extremist reports, the civil unrest, the protests, the shootings, the bombings, the military exercises, the active shooter drills, the color-coded alerts and threat assessments, the fusion centers, the transformation of your local police into extensions of the military, the distribution of military equipment and weapons to local police forces, the government databases containing the names of dissidents and potential troublemakers, thought crimes coming to a city near you. Make no mistake, these developments are all part of a concerted effort to destabilize the country, institute de facto martial law disguised as law and order, and to shift us fully into the iron jaws of the police state. So no, the dramatic increase in police shootings are not accidents. It wasn't an accident that 26-year-old Andrew Scott, who had committed no crime, was gunned down by police who knocked aggressively on his door at 1:30 a.m., failed to identify themselves as police, then repeatedly shot and killed Scott when he answered the door holding a gun in self-defense? That wasn't an accident. The police were investigating a speeding incident by engaging in the middle of the night knock and talk in Scott's apartment complex. So he got shot because people were pounding on his door at 1:30 a.m., didn't identify themselves, and they were looking for someone that was speeding? And these are good guys? It wasn't an accident when LeVar Edwards Jones was shot by a South Carolina officer during a routine traffic stop over a seatbelt violation, as he was in the process of reaching for his license and registration after being asked for it. The trooper justified his shooting of the unarmed man by insisting that Jones reached for his license aggressively. It wasn't an accident when Francisco Cerna, a 73-year-old grandfather with early-stage dementia, was shot and killed by police for refusing to move his hands from his pocket. Police were investigating an unconfirmed report that Cerna had a gun, but it turned out he was only holding a crucifix and made no aggressive movements before being gunned down. It wasn't an accident when 65-year-old Thomas Smith, suffering from Parkinson's disease, called 911 because of a medical problem, only to have his home raided by a SWAT team. Smith was thrown on the ground and placed in handcuffs because of his condition prevented him from following the police's instructions. It was no accident when John Warna, a 95-year-old World War II veteran, died after being shot multiple times by a police officer with a Mossberg shotgun during a raid at Warna's room at an assisted living center. There were 5 police officers on the scene to subdue Warna, who walked around with a walker and was armed with a shoehorn, not a knife, as the police assumed. It wasn't an accident when a 10-year-old boy was subdued by 2 police officers using a taser because the child became unruly at the daycare center he attended. It wasn't an accident when police in South Dakota routinely subjected people, some as young as 3, to catheterizations to forcibly obtain urine samples. It wasn't an accident when Charles Kinley, a behavioral therapist, was shot by police as he was laying on his back with his hands up trying to help an autistic patient who had wandered away from his group home and was sitting in the middle of the road playing with a toy car. The officer who shot Kinsey was reportedly told that neither Kinsley nor the patient had any weapons. It wasn't an accident when Frank Baker was mauled by a police dog and kicked by an officer for not complying quick enough with a police order. Baker, who had done nothing wrong, spent 2 weeks in a hospital with fractured ribs, collapsed lungs, and needed skin grafts for the dog bite injuries. So you tell me, do they need less oversight? None of these incidences were accidents, nor were they isolated, nor were they just a few examples of bad actors, as Sessions insists. Far from being isolated and accidental, police misconduct cases have been so prevalent as to jeopardize the integrity of all the nation's law enforcement agencies. No matter what Trump or Sessions believes, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Americans must obey the government. Despite the corruption of Congress and the complicity of the courts, nowhere in the Constitution does it require absolute compliance to the pawns of a tyrannical government. And despite what most police officers seem to believe, nowhere in the Constitution does it state that Americans must comply with a police order. To suggest otherwise is tyranny. You want to know what it means to be a slave in a police state? It means being obedient, compliant, that every government agent is armed with a weapon. If you believe otherwise, try standing up for your rights. Try being vocal about your freedoms. And just challenging a government official. And see how long you last before you're staring down the barrel of a loaded, government-issued gun.